Welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show, radio to open the heart, heal the soul, awaken the consciousness. Benny, are you awake?
I am always awake for you. Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
I feel, hi, it's like stretching. Oh,
We have to have some of those mornings, right?
Yeah, we do. We
Mhm.
definitely do. And especially because we don't know what the weather's doing.
It's
Um,
fine.
I think it was the day before yesterday. I think I had everything. I woke up with, I thought it was a little bit of snow, and then it was raining, and then it was really windy, and then it was sunny, and then it was dark clouds. And I love it. It just gives you a little bit of everything.
Well, just
Right?
like you and Mother Nature, you are drawing a great comparison. You're just leaving everyone on your toes on what to expect for the day. So that's what I think is important and enjoyable about you.
I think it is.
Right?
Thank you very much.
You're
I love
welcome.
that.
Was that good? Was that all right? Did I save you on that one?
You always do.
Oh,
Betty,
stop
you always do. Yeah. By the way, a lot of my listeners send me emails, and they always want me to convey to you how much they love and appreciate you, Benny.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
yeah,
Appreciate
people do it all the time. They're like, "Oh, Benny is the best. We love Benny."
Oh, thank you
And
very
I
much.
go, "It's true." So I wanted to make sure I pass that on to you because, yeah, I get a few emails every week about that. So.
Oh, well,
I
you're
know.
welcome to send them on to me. I mean, if I want
I
to look at them.
will. Yeah, I
Okay.
will do that. Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So um, I just want to say this. I think it is important to tell people that we appreciate them.
Mhm.
And I think we often forget to do it. So for
Right.
all of you people out there that take the time to send it in, thank you.
Yeah.
Really does make a difference.
It's the little things. I couldn't agree more. That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. So I am Loretta Brown, the owner of Reiki Oasis, located right here in the greater Seattle area for close to 30 years, which is crazy. I do have lots of offerings at Reiki Oasis, and you can go to ReikiOasis.com and find out more about that. Get on the mailing list, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get notifications of all that kind of stuff. Quick check-in with astrology, and then I have a wonderful guest today. I'm really looking forward to having him on the show, and you're going to really enjoy it. So, but I can't skip astrology because we're in massive astrology right now, in case people aren't paying attention. We just experienced the biggest event of the year, which was right now on the date of this show, it's April 20th. But last night here in the great Pacific Northwest, we had an Aries total new moon solar eclipse. It's the second new moon in Aries, the last being at the spring solstice at 0 degrees Aries. And this one went at 29 degrees Aries right at the end. And on this eclipse, the sun was completely eclipsed. And there are places on the planet where you could watch that. And when it's completely eclipsed, it makes it particularly potent and life affecting for not only the next 6 months, but because we've got so much else, other stuff going on, it's for the next 20 years. So take a few moments, if you haven't already done it, and think about your life, the trajectory of your life, what's going on. Is this what you want to be doing? Is this where you want to be? Yeah. Maybe there's something else that is calling to you, or maybe there's something that wants to happen. So solar eclipses signify new beginnings in the evolution of our soul journey. And as it falls in Aries, the sign connected to new beginnings, this energy is magnified. The eclipse is powerful for setting intentions, visualizing outcomes, and seeking opportunities. And as it falls in Aries, it also brings a brand new eclipse cycle that we will be working with for the next 18 months. And pay attention, there's another big eclipse coming at the beginning of May. It will be a lunar eclipse. And I'm just here to tell you these are illuminating events. They're pulling things out from under the carpet or from behind the door. And that's personally as well as globally. Today, April 20, the sun moves out of fiery Aries into earthy, grounded Taurus. And this is going to kind of ground things, slow them down a little bit. It might help everybody find their footing. A lot of my clients have been talking about I don't know, they're either all over the place or they're oblivious to what's going on, right? That's how we all are. And this is a great time for you to attend to your finances. And if you've got anything going on financially, try to get in there and get it taken care of. And also, we've got Mercury going to go retrograde. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. Also, on this day, April 20th, the Sun squares Pluto for the first time since moving into Aquarius a few weeks ago. The Sun in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius will create a square configuration in our cosmic skies, helping to evolve the storyline of Pluto's move into Aquarius, where it will spend the next 20 years. And the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was over 200 years ago. So this is a rare and a once in a lifetime energy to work with Pluto. And it's a planet of transformation and power. It's got a hold of me. And Aquarius is a sign of revolution, technology, freedom, healing, and community. Yeah. So the world is never going to be the same, and neither are you. As I said, Mercury this Friday, we have the very first planet going retrograde since January. Of course, it's Mercury, planet of communication, and it goes retrograde in the sign of Taurus until May 14 and 15. Sometimes Mercury retrograde can cloud our thinking, causing us to overlook things or miss important details. Remember that retrogrades are just an opportunity to go back and rethink things, maybe rethink communications or what is it that's going on. And also it's a little bit of I always believe we're greater than the stars, but it's a little bit of a thing. I'm an energy worker, and for me, everything is energy. So just tune in, tune up, and you'll be able to navigate everything just fine. Also coming up Monday, April 24th, the Sun conjuncts the North Node in Taurus for the last time for another 18 years. And later this year, the North Node will move into Aries, creating a new cycle. The North Node represents our highest destiny and where we are heading. As the North Node wraps up its journey in Taurus and aligns with the Sun for the last time, the lessons of its time are concentrated. This North Node in Taurus has been guiding us to focus on our relationships with the material, abundance, and self-worth. And perhaps you've noticed these areas triggered in your life recently. Where have you felt called to adjust your relationships with material possessions or even the material world? Maybe it's time for you've been challenged with giving and receiving abundance. Maybe your self-worth has been challenged. Have you felt called to stand up for yourself or advocate for yourself more than usual over this last little period of time? And these are fantastic questions to ponder in these astrological cosmic weather. Wow. I got to tell you, that is the greatest segue ever to bring my guest onto the show, especially if you've been wondering, do I like my life? The last few years with the lockdowns and all of this has brought a lot of people into their homes. A lot of people have realized they've had to slow down a little bit. They've actually realized they're kind of unhappy, or they would really like to go do something else. So my guest today, Ray Martin, also known as the Daily Explorer, is an entrepreneur, an award-winning business leader. And in 2005, shattered by divorce and the loss of his father, Ray Martin decided to let go of being a successful business leader to embark on a journey of reinvention by taking a little 6-month sabbatical that apparently lasted 14 years. It's probably still going on, Ray, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk about his journey. He's written a great book called Life Without a Tie, Finding Your Path Amidst the Noise, Chaos, and Pressure to Conform. Thanks for coming on the show, Ray.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I love coming onto the shows, particularly in America, because nobody knows me in America. So it's lovely to meet all the people are listening. So hi to everybody.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am just. I read your book and I just loved it. And I want to create some background for people so they know
Sure.
who you are. Because you're right, we don't know who you are. Who are you? Why are you
Yeah,
on this show?
I'm a 62-year-old Englishman. I've sort of spent my career in commerce. I always had a dream when I was younger to be a successful and well-known businessman. And when I got to my early 40s and had accomplished that, I realized that I hadn't really thought that deeply when I was much younger about what would bring true happiness, because I was in that life and recognized as someone that's successful. I didn't feel very happy in that life at all. In fact, I felt actually quite trapped. And that's where I got to.
Before you go on, I want to ask you a question. Well, maybe I'm jumping the gun on this question, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway.
Go for it.
It's my understanding that you had built a very successful business that was really a very high consciousness sort of a thing.
Yes.
Where, and you can explain to the audience better than I could, but it's, where you're helping businesses do things in a different way. I mean, you even mentioned in your book about how all the people that worked for you, you worked really hard for this type of synergy or whatever.
Yeah.
But it didn't work for you. So could you tell us a little bit more? Because I'm so curious about that, right?
Yeah. As a youngster, I always looked to do work where I felt there was meaning, where it was like I was doing it for a really good reason or a solid purpose to help society or to do something really worthwhile in the community or something. It had to, for me, it was always important to have something that meant something, because I find it quite hard to believe in things that don't mean anything. And so I did fortunately ended up working for someone who had a fantastic mission in the world, and I was a loyal servant for about 10 or 12 years. And then I thought I'd really like to see if I can replicate that for myself and start an organization. And the purpose I had was to bring sort of humanity to the workplace, because in customer service environments and call centers and a lot of these kinds of places where there's thousands of people working, there's a very high turnover of staff because people aren't treated like human beings. They're treated like numbers, and they're given very sort of strict rules at work. And, a lot of people leave, they're feeling like they just don't really have any belonging to the company, any loyalty as such. And I thought that must be costing companies millions of dollars. That's got to change. And so I set out on a crusade and a mission to bring to the awareness of leaders, if you could treat people with dignity as real human beings and invest in their development and in their consciousness and their awareness and how happy they are, and make work a place which enriches their lives, they'll stay longer, they'll work harder, and your business will make more profit. So it wasn't just altruistic, it had a financial element to it. And we even deployed some financial business modelers to prove that there was an uplift in profits from any work that we did, and actually got some data to verify that.
Wow. I live in the Seattle area where tech, lots of techie companies here, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
there is that idea of running people through, right? You bring them in and kind of suck them dry and spit them out the other end and bring more people in, right?
Yeah.
So it's that as I call it, it's soul sucking sort of wage slave mentality, right?
Yeah. And there are exceptions. I worked for some leaders who really cared for me. They really took me under their wing, and they were really personally interested in my life, not just my performance at work. And they wanted me to be happy and successful, and they acted that way and treated me with love and kindness, even though sometimes it was harsh, brutal support at work to do things well. It came from a place of loving kindness. And I'll never forget those people. They've stayed in my memory for all my life. And I'm sure it's the same for your listeners. We always remember those people who give us the radical support and radical challenge when we need it.
Well, and you're touching on a couple of things. Number one, what I call community, like we are people. People are people, and people get dehumanized in so many different ways, right? And also this sense of purpose or fulfillment or something along that line, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you created this amazing very
Company, yeah.
profitable business. And then what happened?
Well, it was a dream and a vision of me and my business partner, who coincidentally was the woman I was married to. And that was when we were just engaged to be married when we decided to leave our employment and start the company. And it was our first child was the company, if you like, before we actually had children. And we both had a shared vision, and we were both passionate about bringing this humanity to the workplace. And we worked brilliantly together. We were like a dream team. We were so complementary. We didn't overlap in our skill sets or anything. It was beautiful. It was like I don't know if you remember the ice skaters, Torvill and Dean, who were so fantastic together.
Yeah.
This is how I felt working with Charlotte, her name is. And so for 10 years, we just built this beautiful business, and we got some great people in, and we encouraged and motivated them to, fully take on the mission with us, and everyone was aligned. And after sort of 10 years, I became the Daily Telegraph Business Leader of the Year in England for the work I'd done as CEO of the company. And so everything was kind of great. However, it was so full on. It was so much part of I didn't really pay attention to anything else other than the company. And so my personal relationship with Charlotte had really taken a toll, and it wasn't working brilliantly. And our marriage was, had question marks around it, the long-term longevity of it. And one day she came back from a business trip and said, quite suddenly, I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company. And it was about a few months after I'd won this award. And so it came at a time where I was in the public eye, and I suddenly felt a lot of fear about the possibility of being humiliated, a bit of guilt, shame about having to tell the world, wow, my wife's leaving, and she's leaving me in the company.
Wow.
And it was an awfully difficult time for me. But it was also, on some level, a massive wake-up call. Like my spirit had gone to sleep in some senses.
Mm-hmm.
Because the company had done so well financially, I'd sort of shifted my attention and awareness from who am I being in the world as a being, a loving being, to how can we make more money this year? And it was a subtle shift that happened a little bit over time, but I'd sort of gone much more in that direction and forgotten that my original reason for doing it was motivated by spirit, not by money. And it woke me up. And at the same time this was happening, my father got very ill and he died. And so within 2 or 3 months, I was out of my marriage. My dad had passed away. I was leaving the home that we'd had together, and I was having to dismantle the company. So everything was collapsing, literally. I said in the book, you probably remember, I described it as standing in a bomb crater about 100 meters wide and turning around 360 and just seeing destruction everywhere. And the whole, and it just, I remember it now because it was many years ago, but it was devastating. I really was paralyzed with sort of sadness, fear, couldn't move. It was one of probably the worst year of my life that year.
It's one of the things I'm very interested in, these sorts of tower moments in people's lives, because sometimes our life does.
What do you call it? A tower? What do you call it? A tower moment?
A tower. TOWER, like a tower falling.
Okay.
Like something's blowing up. I call it a tower.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a Loretta-ism, right? But I also know that when we look at our lives, that there's going to be these, what I call indicators somewhere, that maybe there's something is going to need to change. And then if you don't pay attention to those things, they get louder in life.
Yeah.
And when your life blows up, to me, I'm like, it's a great initiation, but man, that's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you lost everything in a very short period of time. I think in your book, it's 3 months period of time. You went from this award to boom, there you are. And I can't even imagine really how devastating that is, because everything that you used to identify yourself with was gone.
Yeah, it was a real shock. And I didn't know how to, even though I work in the field of coaching, I'm a leadership coach. And so I often meet people in my life these days who are in similar situations, and I'm there to support them. And I just couldn't see my way out of it. It was dark. And I came across this book by a lady called Bronnie Ware, which I'm sure a lot
Oh.
of your readers
Oh.
might have, listeners might have heard of, because she wrote about the top 5 regrets of the dying. It's a very famous book. And this was the book I needed to read in that moment, because she said she'd spoken to over 1,000 people in the last days of their lives. And every single one of them, when she asked them the question, what do you most regret? They'd all said the same 5 things. No matter whether they were a CEO, a millionaire, a janitor, it didn't matter. They all said the same 5 things. And the number one thing that everyone regrets on their deathbed is, how she described it was, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. Yeah. And that just hit me right between the eyes like a bullet. And I thought, that's me. I've been a successful CEO, which was the life that others expected of me, and I've delivered. But it's not the life that's true for me. And I thought, do you know what? I don't know what the life that's true for me is. I don't even know. I have no idea. And then I knew I needed to go on some kind of journey to discover what that was, at least to get into a different environment for a while, change the scenery a bit. And so some very close and supportive friends said, why don't you take a 6-month sabbatical to give yourself time to reflect on that? And I said, that's a really good idea. So I minimalized my life. I sold my house in London. I gave away most of the stuff I owned, left myself with literally a bag of clothes, 22 kilos, and a laptop computer, and headed for Asia, because I'd never been to Asia and I'd never been a backpacker. And I was in my early 40s and I really wanted to do both. And I thought, in Asia, there are people with spiritual wisdom, and I can find out who they are and go and speak to them, learn something and reflect on this. And so I did that, thinking I'd be back in 6 months with myself all sorted and I'd start a new business and get a new home. That's how I actually imagined it. And then I just said goodbye for 6 months to everybody.
I'll be back shortly.
Yeah, I really did. I was convinced I was going to be back sort of like a few months later.
I have this funny image in my head of you with this little checklist going, yes, I'll just do these 10 things and I'll be fine. What's the problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, problem, solution, bam. Here we go. So you went to Asia, Chiang Mai, right? Yeah. I've been to Chiang Mai. So why Chiang Mai? Why?
Well, I didn't go there initially. I went to another part of Thailand because I knew somebody else who was also traveling around Thailand, a woman called Annie, and I wrote about her and how we met in the book.
Yeah,
and she invited me to go traveling with her, and I liked Annie, and I thought that there was a potential for us to maybe even have a long-term relationship. So I said, let's try it out. Let's do it together and let's see what happens. You know, we traveled together for about 1.5 years before we split. But it was enough to get me going because I lacked the confidence and I was quite frightened of being a solo traveler, and she had done lots of it, and she was just giving me the confidence to go and take the risk, and make the leap. And it was lovely. We got on pretty well. And so we both, after a few months in Thailand, had heard that Chiang Mai was a great place and that lots of travelers from all over the world were coming there, and they had lots of meditation, yoga and mind opening type things that we were interested in. Plus a university where we learned how to become TEFL teachers. We wanted to get our certificates to teach English as a foreign language so that we always had a teaching qualification to fall back on as we were traveling. And so we enrolled in the university program and we both got our certificates to teach.
I think it's providential and really wonderful that you met Annie and then you had someone to kind of help you get your feet wet. And enter into that. Like, I just think that's such a wonderful thing, such a blessing. One of the things that I'm thinking about, and you do, you cover so much of this, but I'm trying to be succinct for the audience.
That's okay.
I am thinking, okay, you go from this very busy life, this very, striving for this. And like you say, you got your eyes off the target and it was all about how much money are we going to make, right? Which I think that always makes people unhappy because you never make enough. And then you go to this lifestyle where you're not really doing much of anything. I don't know if you can say anything about that little transitional bit there.
Yeah, I can. I found it personally extremely uncomfortable because I had a lot of guilt and shame almost about having sort of left the rat race.
Yeah.
I sort of felt like I'd taken myself out of the game. And wanted to hide away in shame that I wasn't being a sort of tax-paying citizen and doing my bit and, you know, living the mainstream life that all of my friends and family were living. I thought they'd think I'd gone crazy or something.
Well, plus the fact, you know, people have a tendency, at least here in the States, to say, well, so what do you do? And you're like, well, I'm
Yeah.
laying on the beach and I'm
Well, I was
in
doing some
coffee
of that,
shops, you know.
but
Yeah.
I was in a sort of more like an inner journey with some pleasant surroundings on the outside, but I was searching for knowledge and understanding, partly of myself, because I needed to take ownership. Okay, it wasn't brilliant that my wife said, I'm leaving you, etc. But I thought I had a part to play in that through the way I showed up in the relationship. I can't deny that I had some ownership in that outcome.
Yeah, sure.
And so what I had to know what that was about and where it was coming from in me. And more importantly, how I could change and improve as a human being in future relationships. So I wanted to learn about that. And then the second thing I thought, you know, I've lost my way in terms of my guiding principles for life. How do I regain those or recreate a set of guiding principles now that will see me through the next 10 or 15 years safely in a way I want to live? And so I was in the process of discovery. So the scenery and the surface, it will look great, but on the inside, I was in a lot of turmoil. It was a huge transition. And I even in the book wrote about a guy called William Bridges, who's written many books on transitions. He's one of the thought leaders in the world on transitions. And I read everything he wrote. And I was describing what it's like. It's like trying to get over a high wall and you can't sort of somehow get over it or past it. And you're just repeatedly stuck at the same point until suddenly you have a breakthrough and then you're over or through it. But he says, you know, in his work, he's seen it, a transition. When you have an ending, we want to, because it's so uncomfortable when something ends, like a marriage or a job, we want to go straight to the new beginning immediately with no space in between. And Bridges says that in between these two is a space that he calls the neutral zone. And that neutral zone can last several weeks, months, or even a couple of years in some cases. Mm-hmm. And in that neutral zone, you're going from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So you're in this metamorphosis process. Yeah. You're in a cocoon. Yeah. Nothing looks visibly different from the outside. From the outside, it looks like nothing's happening. But on the inside, what this massive change is going on you're reconfiguring your mind and your heart and your thinking and your beliefs. Everything's changing. And then later when you come out of the cocoon, it's different. And so I was in this cocoon period and I didn't know how long it was going to take. Mm-hmm. And that's the nature of a transition. It's this neutral zone that's got its own rules, which I put in the book for people who want to use them. As it occurred to me. So there are things like, you know, you don't make any big decisions while you're in the neutral zone. You set up temporary structures. You try and look after yourself in little ways. Be kind to yourself because it's very tough psychologically. And I'm the kind of person who beats myself up a lot. I'm very critical to myself. Yeah. So I set this principle of self-acceptance. I made a promise to myself while I was in the cocoon that I would treat myself with love and kindness and speak to myself in my own thinking in a kind way. Because honestly, if someone had a tape recorder and they recorded my thinking as I spoke to myself, as if let's say I had I lived in an apartment with a roommate, and the roommate was speaking to me the way I speak to myself, I would have kicked them out after one day. I would never let someone speak to me like that.
Yeah.
So that's how I was speaking to myself, very cruelly and unkindly. You idiot! You're useless. You know, you don't deserve anything.
Yeah. I wow, I so appreciate what you just said, and I just kind of want to take that and, you know, give it to the listening audience also, because, you know, all of us go through change, and all of us, this cocoon thing. I love what you said there. Like, I'm thinking about how that caterpillar just like jelly in there, like what's going on inside there, right? And then pretty soon, you know, out comes the butterfly. But to be kind to ourselves and to set up those parameters, especially you were saying, setting up structure, you know, things that will support you as you go through this vulnerable time. Yeah.
I think Brene Brown has done some brilliant work on this. She's probably the most listened to person now on vulnerability and these kinds of transitions. She's excellent. Yeah.
So we're going to take a little station break, and I'm loving this conversation.
Okay.
I'm Loretta Brown. My guest today, Ray Martin, life without a tie. I bet that's got more than one meaning. Anyway, don't go away. We'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit more about what is it like when you unplug and how do you find yourself then? Anyway, we'll be right back.
Thank you.
All right, all clear, you two.
What is hope? Hope to me was just that he would get to come home. I had no idea how hard it would be once he got back.
I wish she'd stop drinking so much. She thinks it's helping, but it's not. I hope she sees that soon.
I act like I don't care if he comes to my games, but I hope he does.
I used to hope he'd find happiness again. Now I hope our marriage makes it.
I hope Grandpa will get help. He thinks it's too late, but it's not.
With everything that he's going through, I hope he sees a counselor. I just want my brother back.
I hoped he'd get help. Stop hoping things would get better on their own. He told me to stop asking. I didn't. Then one day he asked for a ride.
Hope is knowing there are other families just like yours, that the veterans they love got help and recovered. Go to maketheconnection.net and turn hope into action.
Did you know that Reiki healing can be done at a distance? It's true. So let Reiki Oasis focus powerful energy to help relieve your stress, grief, sadness, anger, and so much more. Convenient, personalized treatments at a distance can increase lightness of being. During your appointment, find a quiet place to lie down or sit to receive healing energies. If you want help with your dis-ease, visit ReikiOasis.com. Harness life's energy. Visit ReikiOasis.com today.
Hi, this is Eric Ryder, Operations Manager for 1150 AM KKNW. We value your opinion and invite you to 1150kknw.com to fill out the 2023 KKNW Listener Survey. Your responses help us to shape KKNW to your listening needs. As an added incentive, when you fill out the survey, you'll have a chance to win an awesome prize. Complete contest details and your opportunity to help us shape this station can be found at 1150kknw.com.
Alternative Talk 1150, here to uplift your day.
In particular, who is right in that jelly phase of.
Y'all ready to come back? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Who am I? Yeah. So I'm going to give him the book anyway.
Great. Good to do that. Yeah. And
Right.
tell him to call me if he wants to talk. Yeah.
Oh, I will. I will.
Yeah.
Stand by.
Welcome back to the original Loretta Brown Show with my guest, Ray Martin. We're talking about his book, Life Without a Tie. I want to remind everybody that these shows are archived. You can download them for free at the KKNW 1150 AM archives for the original Loretta Brown Show. And of course, we're on iTunes, Podcast One, Megaphone, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify. I'm sure I've left something out. Anyway, obviously they're all over the place. So please download, listen. And you can also find Ray Martin at Ray. What's your website?
Lifewithoutatie.com. Nice and easy to remember.
Yeah, lifewithoutatie.com. I like that. So the title, Life Without a Tie.
Yeah.
So it's more than just a tie that you wear on your body, right?
Yeah, exactly. It came to me when I was in Asia and I'd started writing the early pages of the book, but I wasn't really sure how it was shaping up or how it was going to flow. And I was thinking, what should I call this? Because it was the story of someone leaving a known life and going into the unknown, which is often how Joseph Campbell speaks about it in The Hero's Journey, which is very well-known material on storytelling. Yeah, the protagonist goes into the unknown to discover something new, conquers some kind of challenge, and then brings the new wisdom back to his old life or her old life and shares the jewels with the village. So I was kind of on this arc of storyline. I thought, what should I call this book? And I think it was just running one morning, and suddenly the name Life Without a Tie just seemed to fall into my head from the sky. Life Without a Tie. I went, that's it. Life Without a Tie. That's it.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
It was 2013. And so the first thing I did when I got back from a run was I got onto the internet and I registered the domain lifewithoutatie.com. But I didn't actually make that domain live until last year, 2022. So it sat dormant for 9 years until I finished.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I knew from that moment, and why I knew it was perfect was because as a business leader at the time I was a businessman, we were wearing suits and ties for the most part.
Sure.
And so it was the removal of my business tie, but also it occurred to me that in my life, the 4 ties that hold our lives in place from an identity stance, the 4 ties are your partner or spouse, your house in England, having a house is a tie, your community of friends and family, and your career. Those are the 4 things that define all of us and keep us stuck. You know, I have sometimes, and I coach a lot of CEOs and senior leaders, and some of them say, you know, I've got this opportunity to take a career move. It's in another city, but my wife doesn't want me to take it because she thinks it will disrupt the family life.
Right.
So these are common issues. You know, these ties really operate in people's lives.
Yeah, that's actually true, because I have a lot of people that said, well, I would like to do blah, but the family or the spouse or what, or the job, right?
Yeah, or the job, or I want to do this, but my kids aren't growing up and I need to put them first until I'm ready.
So your life blew up. So it did it for you. And
it did.
Then you ended up beginning to, you got rid of everything. You really had just your backpack, your laptop, and whatever, a few things. And you started to travel around. And we were talking during the break about, like, I was like, what's that like to really do that? Like, I think there's a longing in all of us to be a little bit footloose and fancy free, or maybe it's just Loretta talking. But anyway, what is it like when you really change your life and you learn to live in the present moment?
Well, for me, it was beautiful. You know, I was mostly really loving the difference of the life, because I'd only known one way of living since I was 15 years old. You know, so I never had even any contrast of any kind. You know, I always thought when I was leaving school to go into work and being in business, that was how everyone lived. I had no idea that people lived very different lives to me. You know, lots of different versions and flavors of life. And I'd never actually tried a totally different life until I went traveling. And so it was, I was wearing shorts and sandals. I was meeting hippies, and I was meeting all sorts of interesting religious characters. And I was reading kind of books I never read before. And I was going into yoga classes and doing many, many, many things, which for me were brand new and I've never done in my life. And so consequently, my mind was being altered, because I was having conversations of a different kind and learning insights of a different kind, and everything was different. I was eating food in Asia, but that's totally different to British food. Yeah, you know, and the way that restaurants work and everything was different. So it was just massively different and quite exciting because of it. And of course, meeting lots of other travelers as well and hearing their stories made it even more interesting.
Yeah. At one point, pretty early in your journey, you ended up doing a 30-day meditation. I think it was a 30-day.
10 days.
10 days was 10 days. And can you tell us about that? Because I think that's kind of pivotal.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It came about because it was about 6 months into the trip, and I was in this paradise setting, but I was inside in me in turmoil. I was very agitated, very scared about the future, very worried about how my life was going to kind of work itself out, because I couldn't see with any clarity where this journey was headed. And another traveler I spoke to in a coffee shop, and I told him about it and how anxious I was. And he said, you know what, Ray, you should do a Vipassana meditation retreat. I didn't even know what that was. I'd never heard of meditation. I had no idea. I said, what is that? He said, well, you go into a monastery and you sit in silence for 10 days with monks, and you meditate, and then they sit with you and they teach you about the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching. And it's very, very eye-opening, and it will ground you. And I thought, God, I've never been silent for 10 minutes, let alone 10 days. There's no way I'm going to be able to do it. He said, no, you'll be okay, you know, once you get into the swing of it. And so I decided to try it out on the advice of another traveler, and it was brilliant. Meditation. And I felt it's like someone had taken, if I had a volume knob on the side of my head for the noise in my head, It was on 10 out of 10 before I went in. But as I walked out, someone had turned it down to like 1 or 2 out of 10. I still had a little bit of noise, but nothing like the noise that I had. I felt calm. I felt relaxed. I felt total, they call it equanimity, the Buddhists. I was in a state of inner calmness.
So during your journeys, and of course, people will need to read your book, Life Without a Tie, because you go into so much wonderful detail and take us on the journey. How did you figure out where you were going to go next or what was going to happen next?
Yeah, mostly through conversations, through reading online about different places, and through the desire and interest to learn new stuff as well. All a combination of all of those things. But I can't. And when we had Annie and I had a sort of plan for the first year and a half that we'd worked out when we were in England. But what was driving it for me after a couple of years was things I'd all like. In the first couple of years, I'd come across something like an elephant sanctuary in Thailand where they were rescuing elephants. And I'd been to Nepal in the Himalayas, and I'd set up a picnic for some kids at an orphanage in Pokhara in Nepal. And they loved it, these kids. And so I started to, after a couple of years, I started to think, God, these places have really touched my heart. What could I do while I'm on this trip? What could I do to contribute? What could I do to be useful? How can I use my business knowledge and skills to deploy some real hard help and resources to these people? Because they don't have anyone championing them. They don't have loads of money. They're trying to do stuff on a shoestring. And I was sat with that without knowing the answer. And as I traveled, I was thinking about it. And then by chance, I met a guy, a traveler. And I said, what do you do for fun? He said, I like to run. I run marathons. This guy was 10 years younger than me. In his 30s. I was 48. And I said, oh, tell me about running marathons. And when he told me about it, I got so excited when I was listening. My body started tingling. I knew there was something. I said to him, his name's Matt. I said, Matt, do you think I could run a marathon? He looked at me. He said, well, you look quite fit. Have you run before? I said, no, never. He said, why do you want to do it? And I said, well, I've got this idea that if I could run a marathon, I could start a fundraising foundation, and I could ask my friends around the world to donate money that I could give to this orphanage and stuff. And the marathon would just be an excuse to trigger the whole thing. He said, right. He said, okay, then what I'll do is you stay in Chiang Mai for 6 months. I'll train you how to run a marathon, and I'll make sure you're capable of it. And so I said, okay, it's a deal. And so he became my coach, and he trained me. And he said, what marathon do you want to run? I said, well, let me think about that. And the truth is, 2 years before, I went on a trip to New York, and I saw the end of the New York Marathon in Central Park, and I thought, God, that's the top marathon in the world. I thought, if I ever run a marathon, I want to do it here. But then I forgot about that. And I said, well, I'd like to run the New York Marathon, if I'm honest. He said, well, you need to go in the ballot. And if, that's how you get a place, there's a draw, because there's loads of people who want to do it. So I put my name in the ballot, and I got a place first time, no problem. And I knew that was I call that a confirmation signal. I've got this thing with the universe. When I make a decision to do something, I ask the universe, send me a confirmation signal so that I know it's the right decision. And when I got the place with ease, quickly, first time, I knew that was the right thing. And confirmation signal, I borrow that language from, I used to be a pilot, when I was in my leisure time. And when you're flying an airplane and you're navigating, you need to hear confirmation signals in your ear for various navigation beacons, so that you've got the right beacon that you're following. And that's where I borrow that language from. So that's what it was. And so I ran the New York Marathon in 2009, 1st of November, and I raised $15,000 from friends and donators all around the world. And then I took the money to Nepal, in cash, and went and I supervised it because I was a bit worried they might kind of leak the money away, to be honest. And so I made sure it got spent, every single cent got spent on something for the kids, and computers, software, new roof for one of the school buildings, books, clothes, everything. I got make sure they got everything. It took me 6 months to do that bit. So it was lovely though. It was like a real joy. It was the first work in my life that was done purely for the meaning, for passion. I didn't earn a penny, but it was more satisfying, I think, than hitting some of my targets in my business when I was CEO.
Yeah. So you have gone such a journey, and you returned from I don't know if I want to say you returned from living that lifestyle, because I have a sense you still kind of do it, right?
Yeah, I did. I obviously
Yeah.
downgraded my lifestyle quite a bit because I felt that it wasn't worth the cost, the cost of living that I'd engaged with as an affluent businessman. It required huge amounts of consumption. I was, bought the best products. I was eating at the finest restaurants, belonging to clubs, everything, was expensive. But a lot of those things I didn't really truly enjoy. I was doing it because the character of a businessman does that.
Right.
But it wasn't really me. So I thought if I chopped out a lot of that stuff that I don't really enjoy anyway, and just be much more modest about my financial needs, I probably could live my life happily, earning a lot less, which means I have to work a lot less. So I've got more time to be contributive, to write books, to do projects for the social community and other things, which I really do love. So that's, I just adjusted the balance of things in my life, really.
So I got a couple of questions.
Yeah, no worries.
Loretta's always got questions.
Great.
When you, what advice would you give someone, or how would you help someone? Let's say that somebody's out there listening to this show, and maybe there's people that are ready to throw everything away and go do what you did, right? Maybe there's people that just want to step back a little bit or try to embrace it within the context of their life. What would you like to say to them?
Yeah, I think the place to start, well, it was for me, and I know a lot of people I coach, it's always the start place. I think you've got to have some self-knowledge first. That's the starting point. In the book, I wrote at the end of the book my 6 rules for happiness. And rule number 1 is you've got to build a solid foundation in yourself, and that means self-knowledge. So let me give you some specifics. You've got to know what your values are. Somehow or other, you've got to know what's most important to you on a daily basis. Like my values are freedom, love, integrity, and exploration. So every choice I make, if at all possible, should be honoring at least one of those values. And I don't want to make choices that dishonor those. So, because every time I make a choice that does that, it takes me further off track. And every time I make a choice that honors those values, it puts me right in the middle of my own center line, and I feel great. So knowing what your values are is a good step. Knowing what beliefs you're holding in your mind, because there's 2 kinds of belief. One type of belief empowers you, like holding the belief it's good to be generous. That's a great belief. It's empowering. It's helpful. Everyone benefits from that belief. But holding the belief I'm not good enough, it's not helpful, and it's not 100% true either. So that's a very restricting, limiting belief, to hold that kind of belief.
Yeah.
So knowing the difference and which beliefs you're holding, and then actively working to change your thinking so that those beliefs shift. That's another core foundational thing. What's your purpose? What's your vision? Knowing how you want your life to look, ideally. If you can draw a picture of your ideal life, and then ask yourself, so am I moving towards that vision, or am I moving away from that vision? What is my vision? What does it look like? Things like that. So Ken Robinson wrote this lovely book called Being in Your Element. And when you are really good at something, you're really skillful at, and you've got this love or passion for something, and the 2 things combine, he said, that's when you're in your element. You're doing something you love and something you're really good at, and you just get lost in it. It's so brilliant. Like you see people that do things like dancing or something as a passion. They love it. It feels brilliant. They're really good at it, and they're in their element when they're dancing or singing or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So how much of your life do you spend in your element? Because if you spend no time at all in your element, it's quite hard to keep going.
Yeah.
So building, these are examples. I hope I haven't said too much.
No, you're just fine. I was remembering in your book how you're talking about how you observe people get up and spending time with each other before they go off and go to work, like this sense of community, which I think we've lost a lot of that. Like I was talking to someone the other day, like she said, Loretta, do you know your neighbors? And I said, well, yeah, I actually do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, wow, nobody knows their neighbors anymore, right? Like we don't talk to each other.
Yeah. No, I think that's partly because it's people value being in a community, but they've lost connection with themselves because they're not reflecting. They're not inwardly looking and going, why am I feeling unhappy? What's the need that's not being met right now?
Yeah.
And what steps can I take to meet that need?
Well, and I sometimes think people don't even have the time to ask themselves that question. How am I feeling? It's like, I just got to run to the next thing.
Yeah. And I was very lucky because in the decisions that I made, I gave myself the time to reflect a lot on those things. So I just had that space.
So you are coaching people or working with people now?
Yeah. A lot of people in the business world who are leading organizations or leading parts of organizations. I do a lot of coaching work with those people to help them become better leaders, more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding of what really drives the loyalty and, engagement of the people that work for them. Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a crazy question. I think people are going to have to read the book for this one.
Yes.
How did you change from the before event, the before tower and the after tower?
Well, it's a gradual process for a start, because I'm in the book, I'm writing about a period that lasted 14 years. And I did the Vipassana after 6 months. After 6 years, I did some really deep personal change work called the Hoffman process, which is an 8-day process. And I wrote a chapter about that. I'd started coaching businessmen in Asia as part of my own experimentation, because I was doing that part-time to see how different I was in myself as a coach from when I was in London. So I commenced that, and that was part of my learning, part of my shift. And then I joined an organization called the Asian Leadership Institute, who had this beautiful program to teach the mindfulness from monasteries as part of leadership development in business. And they'd sort of evolved it for the business world in a way it could be taught easily to CEOs and other executives. And I really, really, really I'd always wanted to share the experience of being in those retreats and those mindfulness practices with the business world. And now I had a way I could do it. So I've been a teacher of that program for the last 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And I do that. And that's a virtual program. So I do that online with businessmen all over the world.
When you're talking, I just keep getting this. Number one, your energy feels like a breath of fresh air, and what you're teaching people, it's like all of a sudden we can breathe. Yeah. And I went, you're so in alignment with what I call is the future that we're already living within.
Yeah.
And this idea of bringing ourselves to this higher state of consciousness as we work together in community and finding, why are we really here? What are we really meant to do? And sometimes I think we're just here to have fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that way, but it's definitely a journey. What do you really want to share with people? What do you want to say to them today?
What I really want to share is what I've learned from my own journey is that the most important thing to improve one's life is to really examine what your thinking is. It's not really anything on the outside. This is the great news. The best news I can deliver today is to change your life. You don't need to go on a round the world trip. You don't need to change where you live. You don't need to change anything external, but you need to find ways of shifting how your own thinking works and be paying close attention to what your patterns of thinking are, because that's where all the freedom lies, if you can unlock some of those patterns and beliefs.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it, I think.
The trap of the mind.
Yeah. It's an inner game. Life is definitely an inner game. I listen to a lot of teachers on this topic, and people I really respect, like Joe Dispenza is very popular. I've listened to a lot of his teachings, and it's there's so much in what's possible when you start to see and understand how your own mind is holding you captive and is kind of holding your potential back. And it's hard to see on your own. It sometimes is only possible to even start to get glimpses when you've got someone helping you see that. But the more you practice that and being still and being mindful just gives you more access to your inner wisdom voice, which I found. I didn't even listen to my intuition for years. And then the more I sat still and just be quiet, the more my inner voice of wisdom started to get louder and louder and speak to me and tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally yes to that.
Yeah.
Well, just before we close, I want to let you know I've been to the elephant sanctuary in Thailand, and I've climbed Annapurna. And when I was in the Chitwan National Forest, I came out and the elephants were in the river. Oh my God, who doesn't love elephants?
Yeah.
I laid on my stomach like a little girl and just went, oh my God, they're moving. I love them. So anyway, thank you so much, Ray Martin. Life Without a Thai and lifewithoutathai.com. Thank you so much. Blessings to you on your journeys and to everybody out there. Yeah.
Thanks, Loretta.
We got this. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.